Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're strapping on our imaginary boots and heading out on the Camino de Santiago.
hmm
Now, if you've heard anything about the Camino, you know about the breathtaking routes, the hospitality, the spiritual weight of it all.
For sure.
But we are setting all that aside. We're looking past the scenic views to focus on the ironclad legal code that actually made this whole pilgrimage possible for centuries.
Yeah.
We're talking about the surprisingly sophisticated and often really bizarre Código del Camino.
That's right. I mean, while historians have lovingly documented the art and the architecture, the spirituality of the route,
Yeah, all the beautiful stuff.
the actual Estatuto Jurídico de Peregrino Compostelano, or, let's just call it the Lex Peregrinorum,
Much easier.
it's been historically sidelined. So our mission today is to kind of excavate this foundational body of civil and ecclesiastical norms.
And this wasn't just a friendly guide of where to sleep, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
This is a functioning legal system that governed the lives, the debts, the property of hundreds of thousands of international travelers from the 12th century right up to the 19th.
Okay, so to get why they needed a kind this complex, we need a quick history lesson. Just the basics.
The shortest possible version. It really all starts with the tradition of Santiago the Greater, who around 40 A.D. supposedly kicked off the evangelization of Hispania.
The Son of Thunder.
That's the one. And following his beheading, tradition holds that his remains were miraculously sailed back to the Iberian Peninsula and buried near the mythical Finisterre, the end of the world.
Fast forward a few centuries, and that's the spark.
That's the genesis of the entire cult.
So by the 8th century, we see this monk, Beato de Libana, calling Santiago the head shining of Spain. He's already becoming a huge political symbol.
And it gets formalized very quickly. By 829, King Alfonso II, Alfonso the Chaste, he officially elevates Santiago to patronum et dominum totius Hispaniae.
The patron and lord of all Spain.
Exactly. And that political backing turns this nascent faith into a national mission. It created the framework you needed for a major international route.
And the city that grew around the tomb, Compostela, its name even comes from that discovery story.
It does. Tradition tells us that lights in the sky, like stars, led a hermit named Pelayo and a bishop Teodomiro to the sepulchre in the early 9th century.
So Compostela.
The field illuminated by the star. And what's crucial here, what you have to remember, is that Compostela preserves the only known relics of Santiago.
Which gives it this unparalleled, undisputed religious authority in the medieval world.
Absolutely. The result was traffic like you wouldn't believe. By the 12th century, it was at its peak. There's this quote from an ambassador of the Emir Ali bin Yusuf.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote that the multitude of pilgrims was so great, it scarcely leaves the road to the west free.
Just a highway of people.
And that sheer volume of movement, it required a specific legal category. It codified the terms we still use.
Yeah.
Peregrinus, the pilgrim, peregrinaire, the
Yeah.
journey.
These were legally defined individuals, not just, tourists wandering through.
that's fine.
Okay, so let's unpack that persona. You could spot a pilgrim immediately by their gear, couldn't you? Sort of the medieval version of a specialized backpacker.
Exactly. They were defined by the signa peregrinationis.
Right.
You had the tunic or cloak, the hat with the scallop shell, the vieira.
The staff, the borden.
Right. And the leather bag, the zerand. It was a serious rite of passage. The local priests would bless the pilgrim and all these signs before they even set off.
We tend to romanticize this as a purely religious vow, right? You're doing it for the remission of sin. But the sources show that the motivations were way more complex.
Oh, absolutely. They blur the line between the sacred and the purely mercenary.
How so?
Well, the original intent was spiritual,
Yeah.
sure. But once the Camino became this functioning, protected highway, all these other motivations just flooded in. You had adventure seekers, cultural tourists,
Merchants looking to do a bit of business on the side.
right, combining trade with piety. You even had spies on espionage missions. And then, of course, you had the rogues, the picaros,
Libic yeah.
who just wanted to exploit the free passage and charity that came with the salvoconductos.
Okay, wait, let's define that word immediately. A salvoconducto. That's basically an early passport, right? A guarantee of safe passage.
It is precisely that. It's a safe passage document granted by a king or a noble, guaranteeing your personal safety and exempting you from a lot of local tolls or rules. It was incredibly valuable.
And here's the detail that I find just fascinating. It wasn't always a choice. Many people were actually forced to walk the Camino.
This is one of the most surprising things you find in the Lex Peregrinorum. It shows just how deeply embedded the Camino was in European law. It wasn't just an option. It
Mm.
was a punishment.
Okay, so break down these compulsory journeys for us.
We can identify a few main types.
Mm.
First, you have the confessional pilgrimage. Your confessor imposes it on you for some major sin. But then, and this is the really surprising one, you have the penitential journey, which was imposed by civil judges. It was a criminal sanction.
You're kidding. So instead of sitting in a dungeon, you had to walk the Camino.
You literally walked the Camino to serve your time.
That is the ultimate community service requirement, 1,000 kilometers.
Then you get pilgrimage
Hmm.
by representation. So if a city was facing a plague, like Barcelona in 1456, or a drought,
Girona in 1529 asking for rain.
exactly, the whole community would commission and fund pilgrims to go on their behalf.
It's like a form of collective state-sponsored prayer.
Precisely. And finally, you have two more categories, the testamentary pilgrimage, where a will orders an heir to walk for the soul of the deceased,
And by delegation,
where someone just pays another person to do it for them because they can't or, just won't.
the moment you have criminals, merchants, spies, and paid delegates all on the same highway.
You desperately need rules.
You need systematic rules that apply to everyone, regardless of where they're from, and that's why the Lex Peregrinorum was born.
Yes. That constant international flow of people demanded a common set of rules. And many scholars argue this is what helped shape early international law in Europe. It had to be bigger than local laws.
And the roots of this idea, they go way back to the Romans, don't they? The word peregrinus itself.
Correct. It means one who rides through the field, peregrim. The Romans dealt with this problem centuries earlier. By the 3rd century BC, they had a special court, the Praetura Peregrina.
To handle disputes between citizens and foreigners. And that created the Ilias Gentium, the law of peoples.
That's a perfect summary. It was based on ideas like loyalty, fides, and natural reason.
So Roman law made the rules accessible to foreigners, but the medieval Lex Peregrinorum did something else.
It went further, a lot further. It didn't just make norms accessible, it actively privileged the pilgrim.
Privileged them how? What does that mean?
The pilgrim's person was often considered legally sacred. They were exempted from local taxes, from tolls, from many customary laws that applied to the locals.
So wait, a foreign traveler often had more legal protection than the villagers they were passing through.
In many cases, yes. It was revolutionary, and as you can imagine, a huge source of tension.
I'll bet. If the traveler's getting all these benefits, who's footing the bill? It sounds like the local towns were.
You've hit on the core tension. Kings and councils guaranteed these privileges, but the local communities bore the immediate cost, and the privileges were substantial.
Like the guaranteed freedom of circulation.
Exactly. The Council of Lyon in 1114 decreed that traders, pilgrims, and laborers must go in peace and securely through the lands. It was a mandated peace.
A king's peace.
And you even see Juan II of Castile granting a broad salvo-conducto in 1434 to pilgrims from all over Europe, Germany, France, Italy, even Norway.
And he explicitly protected them even if he was at war with their home country.
He did. It was basically diplomatic immunity granted purely on religious status.
And financially, they got to skip the taxes.
Significant financial exemptions, yes. Kings like Alfonso VI granted exemptions from tolls and tariffs, often to, stimulate traffic through their lands.
But for me, the most staggering legal perk is the suspension of debts and legal deadlines. It's like time just stopped for the pilgrim.
It basically did. The Fuero de Roca, for example, allowed a whole extra year for an inheritance to be sorted out if one of the heirs was on pilgrimage.
And what about the debt thing?
The most radical example is from the Fuero de Cuenca. It literally suspended legal actions against debtors who left for the pilgrimage.
Let me make sure I'm hearing this right, because you need to understand the implication here. If I owed you money and I just decided to walk the Camino, you couldn't legally sue me or have me jailed until I got back.
That's about the size of it. It's like a medieval debt restructuring program enforced by God. A temporary restraining order on your creditors, granted automatically.
Unbelievable. But if they're granting all these perks, they must have come down like a hammer on anyone who tried to exploit the system.
Oh, absolutely. To counter local abuses, the law mandated aggravated responsibility for anyone providing services. Innkeepers, stablers.
The capones and stabularia.
They were held to a much higher standard for the safety of pilgrim goods. That's a concept pulled right from Roman commercial law. If your bag was stolen from the inn, the innkeeper was almost certainly on the hook.
And if you just robbed a pilgrim on the road, your life was basically over.
The punishment was incredibly severe. Because it wasn't just robbery, it was sacrilege. Robbery and outtiner against a pilgrim was met with the gallows,
And the church backed that up.
with automatic excommunication from the Lateran Council of 1123. The road was dangerous, but the law made sure that locals feared harming a pilgrim more than the pilgrim feared the journey.
It's easy to focus on the law, but this huge influx of protected people had to have had massive cultural and economic effects on Spain.
It was a true conduit for Europe. Culturally, the Camino spread Romanesque art and architecture all across the peninsula. It brought European ideas into contact with Spanish creations, everything from Galician Portuguese poetry to the influence of Arabic architecture.
And it created a business class along the route.
Exactly. Economically, the Camino created this sustained commercial opportunity that required a middle class to support it all. Merchants, artisans, innkeepers, professional money changers. The stability from the Lex Peregrinorum directly fueled that growth.
Okay, but let's go back to that tension we mentioned earlier, the picaros, the fraudsters. As the route got more popular, how did the code adapt to filter out the fakes?
Well, early on, warnings were enough. The 12th century Liber Sancti Jacobi just cautioned against false pilgrims abusing charity.
But that couldn't last.
No. As the centuries passed, the civil authorities began imposing really strict controls. The emphasis shifted from sacred protection to state policing.
So the age of the freely wandering anonymous pilgrim was over.
It was. By the 16th, 17th centuries, the crown was demanding strict documentation. Laws required pilgrims to carry explicit licenses, called demissorius, issued by a priest or a judge. Felipe II codified this in 1590.
And the most radical form of control was restricting where you could even walk.
That's the key piece of state overreach. Both Spanish and foreign travelers were penalized as vagabundos, as vagrants, if they were found within 4 leagues off the official Camino route.
So the sacred traveler suddenly becomes a suspicious character under state law. You had to prove you were on the right path or you could be arrested.
It's a huge legal conflict, isn't it? The church protects your sacred status, but the civil authorities can arrest you as a vagrant for taking a detour.
What an administrative nightmare.
It became one, and the abuse was so rampant it provoked widespread complaint. There's this fantastic quote from Padre Feju in 1765.
What did he say?
He complained that many foreigners with the cloak of devout pilgrims are true rogues, or tunantes, who were living entirely off Spanish charity.
Just exploiting the system.
Complete.
Let's pivot to the final and maybe most chaotic challenge the law faced. What happens when a pilgrim dies on the road?
This is where the Lex Peregrinorum really shows its weaknesses. Now, pilgrims had the right to make a will, oral or written. There were notaries at the big hospitals, like San Marcos and Leon.
But if they died without a will?
Chaos. If they died intestate, the rules were so inconsistent they were almost arbitrary. The kings couldn't even make up their minds.
The sources show the laws changing every couple of years.
They change constantly. It illustrates the practical difficulty. Imagine being an heir trying to track down property across all these fragmented jurisdictions. One year, King Alfonso IX says the property is split 3 ways between the innkeeper, the chaplain, and the king.
And then 2 years later?
2 years later, it all goes to the bishop, and after 2 years, it's used to fund the war against the Moors.
So what was the underlying problem? Why couldn't they just settle on a rule?
The challenge was a constant tug of war. Local laws, the fueros, consistently pulled the property back to the local entity. The innkeeper, the town, the crown. But ecclesiastical law argued it should be used for pious causes.
So the result was just massive confusion and a legal minefield for anyone trying to recover their dead relative's property.
Exactly. A real mess.
But despite all that confusion over property, one thing remained consistent.
Yes, the sanctity of the person. The burial was always solemn. It usually took place in the hospital grounds or the municipal cemetery. It affirmed the protected, sacred status of the traveler, no matter the administrative chaos they left behind.
This whole deep dive just shows that the Camino was an institution built not just on faith, but on, truly unprecedented legal protection.
It really was an early laboratory for international law and rights. It established the traveler as this uniquely privileged person in a time of deep political fragmentation. It's proof of the immense legislative power of a shared belief.
It makes you look at every single step on the Camino differently. The Siete Partidas, that great Spanish legal code, it made a clear distinction between pilgrims, those serving God, and merchants who were out to gain something. So, knowing the risks, but also the incredible privileges granted by the Lex Peregrinorum, if you were setting out today, what would your motivation truly be? Would it be purely to serve God? Or would it be to gain something, the adventure, the culture, the self-discovery?
Great question.
And if it were the latter, how might the laws of our modern society need to change to accommodate and protect your specific kind of journey?
That tension between piety and material gain, it really defines the Camino's entire history. It confirms the road is so much more than an ancient footpath. It's a historical, a spiritual, and a legislative monument that still raises these profound questions about travel, law, and human purpose.